Malawi's struggle for freedom, how the poor fought an empire. Welcome back to Untold Africa, the channel where we put the people back into African history. Today we head to the warm heart of Africa, Malawi. Known for its stunning lakes and kind-hearted people, this land was once a battleground between colonial exploitation and grassroots resistance. This is not just a tale of British rule and independence negotiations. This is the story of how farmers, market women, miners, students, and domestic workers challenged one of the world's most powerful empires, not with guns, but with unity, fire, and unshakable belief in freedom. Before the British ever set foot in this land, it was ruled by the powerful Malawi Confederacy, which stretched from the 15th to the 18th century. This was not an empty land waiting to be discovered. It had kings, it had trade, it had systems. But in 1891, the British came calling. They declared the area the British Central Africa Protectorate and by 1907 renamed it Nyasaland, named after Lake Nyasa. That's Lake Malawi to the people who actually live there. Let's talk class. When the British arrived, they did what they did best: extract wealth. They expropriated fertile land for European settlers, forcing African farmers into what was called the thangata system, a colonial rent labor scheme. Here's how it worked. Africans had to pay rent for the land they had always lived on, not with money, but with labor, back-breaking work on tobacco or tea estates in exchange for mere survival. By the 1930s, over 100,000 Malawians were trapped in this system annually. This was legalized exploitation. This was class warfare with a smiling colonial face. But people pushed back. Farmers protested unfair taxes. Migrant laborers who worked in the mines of South Africa and Rhodesia came back with radical ideas and stories of rebellion. By 1945, Nyasaland had over 300,000 workers migrating annually. These were the rural poor whose political consciousness was shaped by hardship and humiliation. And with every return came stories about strikes, about resistance, and about a world beyond British control. Now let's talk about women, the real heartbeat of resistance. Women in Malawi were not just supporters. They were leaders in disguise. During the 1930s and 40s, women organized food protests, especially when colonial taxes drove up prices. They formed village savings groups, educated children about Malawian identity, and built informal support networks for activists. In towns like Zomba and Blantyre, market women refused to sell to colonial officers. These acts may seem small, but in a system built on control, every refusal was a revolution. Colonial education was designed to produce obedient clerks, but the youth turned it into a weapon. They read books, they started secret groups, they printed leaflets calling for self-rule. In the 1950s, students and young professionals began organizing political study circles. They followed the rise of Ghana's independence, the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya, and the civil rights movement abroad. Groups like the Nyasaland African Congress Youth League emerged, driven by the working-class sons and daughters of farmers and laborers. They were the soul of the nationalist engine. In 1953, the British threw gasoline on the fire by creating the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland, a political merger that lumped Malawi together with Zambia and white minority-ruled Zimbabwe. Malawians hated it. Why? It handed more power to white settlers and pushed black Africans further down the social and economic ladder. This sparked mass resistance, strikes, boycotts, speeches, songs. Ordinary people filled the streets. One leader emerged above the rest, Dr. Hastings Banda, a Western-educated nationalist who returned from abroad in 1958 to lead the movement. But Banda didn't do it alone. The Congress had roots in the villages, schools, and markets. Without the grassroots resistance of the working class, no leader could have moved the mountain of colonialism. In 1959, the British declared a state of emergency. They arrested Banda and over 1,300 activists, but the people did not back down. Women marched, students shouted, farmers went on strike. The prisons were full, but so were the hearts of the people, full of courage. The Nyasaland African Congress was banned, but its spirit spread like wildfire. In 1961, after intense pressure and a landslide electoral victory, Banda was released. 2 years later, in 1963, Malawi became self-governing. On July 6, 1964, Malawi gained full independence. Independence was not a gift from Britain. It was the result of decades of peasant struggle, youth organizing, women's resistance, and workers' sacrifice. But freedom came with complexity. Banda soon became president for life and suppressed dissent. The same working class that had fought for liberation now found itself silenced under a new elite. Still, the legacy of those who fought colonialism lives on in every free election, every school built, every farmer's voice raised. Malawi's journey to freedom was not paved by politicians alone. It was paved by the many, not the few. By women who resisted quietly, youths who learned and organized, and the rural poor who said enough is enough. This is the true history of Nyasaland, now known as Malawi, a people who refused to be reduced to tenants on their own land. Thank you for watching Untold Africa. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share, because the history of Africa does not belong to empires, it belongs to its people.